Welcome, everyone. I am Adrian Miller, Executive Director of the Colorado Council of Churches. Thank you for joining us for our January 2026 Lunch and Learn with Reverend Roland Halpern. Our Lunch and Learns are designed to give you a sense of the mission of the Colorado Council of Churches, the various things we do, and we like to highlight issues that are important. And today is a very important one because our mission is walking together in faith, which means getting to know each other across our denominational lines as Christians, but then working together for justice. And this is our social justice mission. One of our most important ministries is actually being present at the state capitol in Colorado with a team of volunteers we call Voices for Justice. So this is information for anybody who would like to know how things operate at the Colorado State Capitol, how a bill becomes law, and also how you can become effective. Reverend Halpern will go through his presentation and we will take questions. So you can hold your questions till the end. Great. This is being recorded and it will be posted on the Colorado Council of Churches YouTube channel. And so people can watch it. All right, with that, I'll turn it over to Reverend Roland.
Hey, well, welcome. Again, my name is Roland Halpern. I've been on the board of the Colorado Council of Churches for probably about 10 years, and I'm currently the chair of the council. I retired in 2016, and one of the problems with retiring is everybody wants a piece of you. And now all I'm doing is volunteering for a lot of organizations and doing a lot of advocacy work. So we're going to go ahead and talk about that. I have about 20 years experience working at the Capitol. So I'm going to try and condense my 20 years of experience down into the time we have. So let's go ahead and get started. So there's three main ways that laws get passed. There's other ways, but I'm going to go into the ones that are the most common and that we're most familiar with. One is by the ballot initiative. Another is court ruling, and then legislatively, which is what we're focusing on today. So the ballot initiative basically is where people can gather signatures. There's two ways to do a ballot initiative. One is for legislators to decide they want to put something on the upcoming calendar for the election. Another way is in the states you see in blue, where there's citizen initiatives, where you or I as a citizen could go out, gather the required number of signatures, and that would put something on the ballot. Colorado does have that thing, and you've probably been outside of a King Soopers or some other place where you've seen people that are gathering signatures to try and get various things on the ballot. There's also court rulings, and I'm just using the example of Roe v. Wade, where initially the Supreme Court said that even though the Constitution doesn't mention abortion, it confers there's a right to have one. But then recently, the Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization totally overturned that. They use the same logic. There's no mention of it, and therefore there's no right to it. So one of the problems you have with court rulings is they can change from time to time. They're not carved in stone, if you will. And then we have the legislative process, and that's what we're going to be talking about here. And this is just an example of a bill that I worked on that was signed into law back in 2024. When you look at a bill number, the HB indicates it's a House bill. If this were a Senate bill, there'd be an S in front. It's followed by the year. So this was 2 years ago, 24, and then the actual bill number 1458. So people ask, well, what about protests, boycotts, petitions? Can't we do that to change the laws? And protests rarely change laws. And this is going back to June of last year, the No Kings, where everybody was protesting against the current president. And of course, he's still president. So we didn't have a lot of success there with the protests. Boycotts rarely change laws as well. They draw attention. They might stop certain people for a short period of time from, in this particular case, from participating, patronizing a restaurant. But there's little incentive for the corporation, if you will, to do anything about it because people are still going to buy there regardless of the boycotts in most cases. And then promises are not laws. And you have a lot of times where maybe a boycott or a protest will result in a corporation saying, okay, we'll change our laws. We're going to be more environmentally friendly. We're going to do other things. but that's only a promise. It's not a law, and that can be broken at any time. This is just a headline. Big business is abandoning climate goals, and it's talking about Amazon, Wells Fargo, others that had committed to certain things to improve the environment and kind of have reneged on those. And one of the problems you also have with this type of thing is corporation might say, okay, we're not going to do something for a certain period of time, but that opens the door for other corporations to come in and exploit that because now there's an opening and they can come in and do what the other corporation was doing. So it's not really that effective, if that makes sense. And petitions rarely change the laws either. Nowadays, with AI, it doesn't take much effort to sign a petition. Every day, I get probably 3 or 4 requests from Care to Cause or um, all of these other things asking me to click on for this petition or that petition. And I will do it, but it's not really effective. Lawmakers now call that slacktivism because they realize in most instances nothing really went into it other than somebody making a request that you sign on. The other thing is the signers might not even live in that lawmaker's district, and they're only going to be concerned with their constituents because those are the people that can vote them in or out. And it might not even be a real person. And here's just one example: tell Trump to stop lecturing Democrats. And you can see, and I just took a sampling. One of the people is from Belgium, another from Brazil. There's Italy, Romania, Spain, United Kingdom, etc. And they're not going to have any influence over what happens in a particular constituent's district. But there is value in protests and boycotts and the petitions because they do raise public awareness. So there's an education component, and some people will be influenced by that. They can identify who the animal champions are. So if I'm working, and I work commonly with animal issues, if we see somebody who's really strong, really compelling, makes really good arguments, I can reach out to that person and I can say, hey, we'd like to have you as a witness when we introduce something in the legislature. So it does identify who the cream of the crop is, if you will. It also allows us to combine our lists so that if somebody has 10,000 people here and 5,000 people there, we can combine those and now we have potentially 15,000 advocates. And it exposes the oppositional arguments. So we know going in what those arguments are going to be. We can fact check them. We can develop rebuttals and so forth. So there really is value in them. They might not directly change laws, but indirectly, they can pave the way towards changing laws. So why do we prefer legislation, at least from my perspective? Voter initiatives are expensive. I've been involved in several. The cheapest one I had was $4 million. So that money has to be raised. It's really hard to do. I've been involved in ones that have ranged anywhere from $4 to $12 million. So you need a lot of money behind that. There's advertising, mailings, phone banking, public education, the social media, the town halls, and the signature gathering takes a lot of time and must meet the submission deadlines. And one of the biggest impediments on any voter initiative, a ballot initiative, is gathering those signatures. It's very, very rare for volunteers to be able to accomplish it. So in almost every campaign I've been involved in, you've had to hire professional signature gatherers. And as you get closer to the deadline, you might be paying as much as $15 or $20 per signature. And in Colorado right now, we need a little over 124,000 signatures to get an issue on the ballot. And just think about that cost that's involved. And that's where that 4 million, 7 million, 12 million typically comes in. And court rulings have limited applications. It's really subject to interpretation. And in the Roe v. Wade one I pointed out earlier, one court might interpret it this way and another court might interpret it that way. The laws are going to vary by state, and then it's a lengthy process. There can be delays and appeals, and it's not unusual for a court ruling to take a decade in some cases to come through. And that's why we're really not keen on those. But you as an individual or you as a group can change the laws. So unlike the petitions, the boycotts, the protests, lawmakers are going to listen to you because you have something they want, and that's your vote. And so even if they don't agree with you necessarily, They're still going to listen because it's going to look really bad if they refuse to talk to you, if they refuse to meet with you, because then you can go out on social media and say, hey, I tried to set up a meeting with Senator or Representative so and so, and they wouldn't even give me the time of day. And it makes them really look bad. So they will talk to you even if they don't disagree, or even if they don't agree with you. And it is a numbers game. Basically, when you're working on legislation at the Capitol, they have the equivalent of a tick sheet, and they look at they just split down the middle, for or against. And when people call in or write letters or meet with their lawmakers, they're going to look at the numbers. And if the for grossly outweighs the against, they're probably going to go for the for, or if it's the against, they'll go for the against. But it is a numbers game, and that's really important to know. So we'll talk about how a bill becomes law in Colorado. All bills are the result of an idea, and that idea may be introducing something entirely new. It could be strengthening an existing law, fixing or repealing an existing law that's outdated or ineffective. And a lot of ideas originate from individuals who contact their legislator and say, why isn't this happening? And in almost every bill I've been involved with as Colorado Voters for Animals, it's an individual like yourself who's come to us and said, I was at the circus and I didn't like the way they were treating elephants. It's horrible. Can you do something about it? And we actually got a law changed as a result of that that keeps circuses out of Colorado. So a lot of those are people that come to me and say something is wrong, it needs to be fixed, and we look into it. And if we can reasonably do it, we'll do it as well. Sometimes it's the result of a lawmaker who wants to run something because when they ran for office, they said, if I'm elected, I'm going to introduce legislation that will do this or that. So that's another way that laws get introduced. Or it also could be the result of something that's really an exigent set of circumstances. For instance, following the Marshall Fire, there were a lot of bills introduced to enact laws that would make sure that in the case of people that lost their home, they'd have a safe place to go, especially if they had a pet. And for the idea to work, you've got to find a legislator that's willing to sponsor it. They agree that change is needed and they're willing to work with all the stakeholders throughout the process. And it can be a very lengthy process. Some of the bills I've worked with, it's taken us 4 or 5 years to get them through. So it can be very lengthy. And one of the problems you have is if that particular lawmaker happens to be term limited, um, that you have to find a new sponsor for that going forward. So let's look at the numbers really quickly. We presently have 100 legislators, 65 representatives, and 35 senators. Lawmakers are limited to serving 8-year terms. So that can be 4 terms for representatives because they have 2-year terms. So they're up for election or reelection every 2 years. For the senators, it's 4-year terms and they have 2 terms, and those are staggered every election cycle. So for the next election, for instance, in 2026, there's only going to be 18 of these 35 senators that are going to have their seats open. In terms of representation, senators currently represent about 165,000 residents, and representatives represent about 88,000 representatives, 89,000. So Colorado, like Congress, has a bicameral system, and that means a bill has to pass through both chambers before it can actually go to the governor for signature, veto, or inaction. So our legislative session runs for 120 consecutive days. For this year, we start next Wednesday, January 14th, and the session will end May 13th. That's not a lot of time. So all bills really deserve to be heard, but this is just a sample of states that have introduced bills in 2024. We don't have the 2025 figures yet because the year's just ended, but look at New York. In New York, 24,490 bills were introduced. That's an amazing amount. Do you think they're all going to get heard? No. A lot of those just get tabled, they get put in a drawer. If the Speaker of the House or the President of the Senate doesn't personally like the sponsor of the bill or the intent of the bill, they can basically do the equivalent of shredding it. So enter the gavel amendment, and this is unique to Colorado. Back in 1988, with 72% of voter support, we passed the gavel amendment, which is simply an acronym for give a vote to every legislator. And what this means is every bill that's introduced is guaranteed a public hearing. The trade-off is lawmakers can only introduce 5 bills per session. We just saw that that example in New York. So we have 5 bills per session. We have 100 legislators. That's arguably 500 bills that can be introduced. We saw in New York it was over 24,000, but the trade-off just ensures that the bills do get heard within that 120-day period. Lawmakers can ask for additional late bills to be filed. It's rare that they're approved, but if there's an emergency situation where it's determined we can't wait for next year to introduce new legislation, for example, if it's responding to a catastrophe or something, COVID, something like that, an additional bill could be introduced and it might be approved. In 2024, for example, we had a total of 585 bills that were introduced. So that's the 500 that are guaranteed, but there's also other bills such as the large bill or the long bill, which is the budget. There's all kinds of other things, and they're not subject to that 5 bill rule. Most bills are thought about long before the session starts. It's not unusual for bills to be worked on in the prior year or even prior years. In fact, I'm working on a bill that we started 2 years ago, and it's still not ready for prime time. We're still working on the issues. And the common wisdom is if you're not ready to introduce that bill by August, it's not going to be introduced in the next session. A lot of people think, oh, the session starts in January. I can approach my lawmaker, talk to them about an issue, and they're going to go ahead and draft a bill and put it in. It's probably not going to happen. Lawmakers are also required to file 3 titles of their bills by December 1st, or they lose a bill, meaning then they only have 4 bills they can work on. So there's a lot of pressure to make sure that the 3 of those titles, and not necessarily the whole bill, but at least the title, is introduced by December 1st. And then the remaining 2 bills, if you're in the Senate, they have to be filed by the 10th day after session starts, and for the representatives in the House by the 17th day. So the first hurdle, all bills are going to be assigned to a committee for a public hearing. And typically the assignments make sense. If it has to do with business, it goes into business and finance. If it has to do with agriculture, it goes to agriculture, and so forth. So committees can have as few as 5 committee members or as many as 13. And it will depend on the type of committee. And all that's needed is a simple majority to advance it to the next step. So if the committee only has 5 members, you need 3 votes to get it approved, or 3 votes to kill it, if you will. And if it's a large committee that has 13, it would be 7. So we're going to look at how the bill becomes law in the legislative process in Colorado. And this is assuming the bill starts in the House, but it could just as easily start in the Senate. But we're looking at something introduced in the House. So the bill gets introduced, and at that point, it gets assigned a bill number. It then gets assigned to a committee. And again, we have to have a public hearing by law. And in that committee hearing, the bill is either going to get killed or it's going to get passed. Assuming it gets passed, it then goes to a second reading to the Committee of the Whole, commonly referred to as the COW. And the Committee of the Whole is actually a floor vote of all the lawmakers. So again, this is looking at a House bill. So we would be looking at 65 representatives on the floor who can debate this bill, who can talk about it, etc. There is no more opportunity for public testimony because that ended at the first committee hearing. But it gets debated on the floor. And then again, it can get killed or it can get passed based on that. What happens with the second reading, it's a verbal or a voice vote. So the speaker will simply say, all those in favor say aye, all those opposed say nay. And it's interesting because it doesn't really matter on the volume. Sometimes if the speaker is in favor of the bill, even though the volume for the nays might seem a little louder, they can say it passes. I've seen that happen. But then it goes to the third reading, the committee of the whole, and this is actually a vote on record. And you cannot be excused from doing this, from voting, unless maybe you're sick and we're not able to attend. But it's a formal vote. They lock the door. The lawmakers are not allowed to leave until the vote actually takes place. And again, it could be killed or passed. And assuming it passes, it then goes over to the other chamber. We talked about we're a bicameral system where it has to be passed in both chambers. So it now goes over to a committee hearing. In this case, it would be a House committee. The only thing that stays the same at this point is the bill number. So that bill number is retained. But again, it goes to a committee hearing. It's either killed or passed. It goes to a committee of the whole reading, again, a voice vote. Assuming that passes, it goes to a formal vote. And assuming that passes, it would go over to the other section all the way through, and then we go to the governor. And this assumes that there's no changes in either chamber. If we're in the Senate and the Senate says we like the bill except for this, then it has to go back to the committee of the House of Origin to be voted on again. So this is sometimes a stalling tactic. The people in either chamber might not want to look bad by killing the bill. So they might say, well, we really like it except for this, and we're getting towards the end of session. And so it goes back to the other chamber and the clock's already going to run. And it's just one legislative tactic that can be used to basically kill a bill before it gets to the governor. Once it gets to the governor has the option of signing the bill into law, doing a veto, or enacting. And during session, the governor has 10 days to sign the bill into law or veto it, or if the governor doesn't do anything, it automatically will move forward. So it's called a pocket veto. So the governor might not want to go on record as opposing or supporting something, so they can just fail to act on it, and then it will automatically go to become law. Now, if it's after session, which does happen because a bill might be signed 2 days before the end of session, in that case, the governor has 30 days again to approve, to veto, or enact on it. And a veto can be overridden if you have a 2/3 majority in both the House and the Senate. So what's the point? A lot of people say. When we talk with lawmakers, and this is one of the reasons we have lobbyists, they actually count the vote before we actually go into the hearings. They know if somebody's going to be supporting or opposed. And that might sound like a bad thing, but if lobbyists really do their job, and if we really do our job and contact our lawmakers and meet with them and talk about legislation, that's going to help them to make up their mind before the hearing is actually taking place. So we shouldn't be discouraged by the fact that their minds are already made up. I mean, in essence, that's a good thing. But there are certain circumstances where even if we know that based on the vote count that it's not going to make it through, we might want to proceed with the hearing because it raises visibility. The lawmakers know they're being watched. They know it's being recorded. It's on the record. Often during a hearing, a particular legislator or a committee might object to something, a certain part of a bill that can be amended during the hearing to fix those concerns, to help it move forward. There are layovers. I've been involved in hearings where the committee has said to the sponsor, we really like your bill, but this is a problem. We're going to give you a week to go back and fix it and come back and represent it, and then we'll take a vote on it. So it allows certain flaws to be corrected to get that bill through. And then there's PIs, which is a postpone indefinitely. And those can be good things or bad things. In election years, we don't like PIs, postpone indefinitely, because it doesn't get lawmakers on the record as to whether they support or oppose a particular piece of legislation. And that can really hurt. We as Colorado Voters for Animals create what we call a ballot buddy. And we look at how lawmakers voted on particular issues, and we then give them a score, if you will, for their level of animal friendliness. And again, as I mentioned earlier, this process can be for any type of bill. So it's not just animal issues. If you're working on social justice issues, housing, all kinds of other things, health, um, that helps you create basically a scorecard for how that legislator supports a particular issue. But if they haven't voted on it and they're not on the record, you really can't use that to say, hey, this person is housing friendly, or this person is, you know, opposed to it or whatever. So we hate PIs in election years. In other years, they can be okay. Sometimes you will want to do a PI postpone because you don't want to vote count on it. You don't want to go back the next year with a new bill and have potential sponsors say, well, you know, it was voted down last year. What makes you think this year is going to be different? So this is all kind of part of strategies, and it really gets into the weeds. And there's a lot of things, and I could spend a whole hour just talking about that, but I'm not going to. But every now and then, in some situations, there will be persuasive testimony that gets a lawmaker to change his or her mind and either then kill a bill or advance it. So I'm just going to show you how to look up bills if you're not familiar with this process. All you have to do is Google Colorado General Assembly. This is what you're going to see. The first screen is going to pop up, and it's going to have at the bottom bills, laws, legislators, so you can identify who the legislators are, the committees, so you can identify who's on those committees, the initiatives, the budget. Audits we really don't worry about, and we don't really worry about publications either. But those are kind of the drop-down menus you can go to. So in this example, I'm just clicking on bills. When I click on bills, you can do bills, search bills, build digest in prior sessions. And here I'm just going to go ahead and search one of the bills. And in this case, you can enter either the bill number if you know it. You can enter the sponsor's name if you have that. In this case, I'm just putting in the buzzwords childcare for whatever reason. And it will pull up all of the bills for 2025 because I selected 2025 that have anything to do with childcare. And you can show that there were 119 results of bills that had something to do with childcare. But in this particular case, I'm going to go with the one at the top, the measures to support early childcare, uh, childhood health. So I click on that, and it's going to bring up the bill number, which is 17, bill number 17. It's going to show me who the sponsors of those bills were. It gives me a summary of the bill. You can go ahead and click on those other ones where you'll actually be able to access the bill. Shows you the committee it was referred to for the hearing. In this case, Health and Human Services. And this one also went to appropriations, which means there was some kind of money involved in it. And so it has to be looked at by appropriations. If this passes, how much is it going to cost us to implement? And I'll just sidetrack real quickly here and say, as you're probably aware, we've got a real budget crisis right now in Colorado. And the common wisdom is anything with money attached to it is probably not going to make it. It's going to be very rare for any bill that involves money to go through. Not saying it won't happen, but it's going to be very rare. And we as advocates right now are very much aware of that. And so there were bills we wanted to introduce, but we know they involve money. And so we're saying, let's wait till 2027 or some future time when the stars are more aligned with respect to generating money for that. So again, clicking on that, I can click on that and it can show me the history of the bill. And you have the option, there's PDFs that you can download on all of these things. So you can look at the original bill as it was introduced. You can look at the changes. So that's the engrossed and the re-engrossed and the revised. And the final act would be the final language that was determined. Again, you have the bill text. You can go to the fiscal note. You can go to the committees, etc. So you have all this opportunity to look into that. So here I just looked at what the votes were. So there's a vote record you can click on. And this just example shows you there were in the Senate, this one was in the Senate, there were 25 yes votes, 10 no votes, and you can then go over and take a look and see who voted yes and who voted no. And when we as Colorado Voters for Animals put together our ballot buddy, this is what we look at. We use this as a scorecard, and we can evaluate all the ones that supported our bills and all the ones that opposed our bills and give it a rating that way. So let's talk a little bit about testifying. Um, as we mentioned with the gavel amendment, all bills receive a public hearing and anybody can testify. It doesn't matter if you're a citizen of Colorado, resident of Colorado, anybody can sign up to testify. And testifying is usually, it's a very easy process. What you do now is you go online, and when you select the bill we were talking about earlier, for example, you do have an opportunity to click on to register to testify. Now, testimony can be remote, so you can do that via Zoom. It can be in person, or you can submit written testimony. I don't like the remote testimony unless it's strictly necessary. And I don't like the written testimony because I think the written testimony is really ineffective. Keep in mind, lawmakers are working on 500 bills. If you submit written testimony, it's very possible they're not even going to take the time to review it. With the Zoom testimony, you're remote, you're a little box on the screen, if you will. They may not be paying attention. And so in person is the best testimony because you're looking at them in the eye. They have to look back. They can't ignore you. They can't be like texting and things while you're doing that. They have to pay attention. So I really recommend testifying in person. And it's not hard. Testimony is usually limited to 3 minutes. So you don't have to really worry about, voluminous testimony. And if there's a lot of witnesses, like over 10 on a particular issue, they usually cut it to 2 minutes. That's 350 words. It's not a lot. So that being said, let's go ahead and move on. The bill sponsor usually has the courtesy of determining the order of the witnesses. Sometimes they'll want all the pro witnesses to go first, sometimes all the con witnesses, and sometimes they'll stagger pro, con, pro, con, pro, con. And this is a strategy issue. So it'll be up to that sponsor to determine what the strategy is going to be. If they only have, for example, 2 witnesses that oppose and 10 witnesses who support, they might want to put the opposition up first because the opposition might come in with really strong testimony, but after you get through 10 people who totally refute that, that's going to make more of an impact, if you will. Lawmakers, keep this in mind for your testimony. They don't need the facts and the figures because they've already gotten that. They've already gotten talking points. If you have a lobbyist, that person has already gone in and talked to the lawmaker about it, presented them with the facts and the figures, so you don't need the numbers. That all happens before the hearing takes place. And again, that's one of the reasons the lawmakers in 95% of the cases have already made up their mind. They have the facts, they have the figures, they've seen all of that. They met with the lobbyists, and you're a lobbyist whether you realize it or not. You're just called a citizen lobbyist. You're just not a professional lobbyist, and the only difference is a professional lobbyist is getting paid for their services. So skip all the facts and the numbers. You go right to the personal stories. That is the most compelling. Personal stories, what a particular piece of legislation is going to mean to you or is going to mean to somebody else. And you need to know your stuff in advance. Lawmakers are going to know right away whether or not you know your material. I can't tell you the number of times I've been in a hearing where somebody's been testifying and what they're testifying on doesn't seem to have anything to do with the bill. And the lawmaker will say, did you actually read the bill? And that can be the most embarrassing thing for a witness to say, yeah, and to try and fudge it. So you have to read that bill and you have to check for the most current version. Because that bill, there's a thing, for instance, called a strike below, where the bill number and the bill title can be the same, but the lawmaker might have decided, well, my bill doesn't have a chance of getting through right now, so I'm going to scrap it and I'm going to put in entirely new language and entirely new intent and everything else. So the bill can look completely different by the time it gets to the hearing or whatever. And so if you don't know the latest version, it can really be embarrassing for you. So you have to read the actual text. You have to know if there's a fiscal note, and you have to know if there's amendments. And again, going back to what we looked at earlier, you can find all that information on the General Assembly website. You need to know how the statutes are going to change the law. And to get to the current statutes, again, you can go back to the Colorado General Assembly website, and it actually links you to Lexis, and you can then pull up the actual statute. And the interesting thing about the statutes is at the bottom, they'll have all kinds of notes about when this was changed, why it was changed, etc. So it gives you a little history behind the bill itself. You also need to know how a bill's going to be enforced. You might have a really good bill, and a lawmaker will say, well, how is this going to be enforced? And so that you need to know. And in most cases, enforcement is going to be through law enforcement authorities, but maybe not. And you need to know that. And if there's no mechanism for enforcement, a lawmaker is going to say, well, what's the point? Great, we have a bill, but we can't enforce it. So really, what's the point in doing that? So you need to think about the enforcement option. And every single law has unintended consequences. I've never seen a perfect bill, and I don't think you're going to meet anybody who ever has. So you have to think about what those consequences are, and is the good going to outweigh the bad? And you need to think about that. And then you have to be versed in your opponent's arguments. You need to know what they're going to say so that you can basically build your rebuttals, build your arguments against, get your facts and figures and reports and all that to help rebut those arguments. And we, as Colorado Voice for Animals and most other organizations, we do that through the stakeholder process. We actually meet with our opponents before the bill even gets introduced, and we say, here's what we're working on. Tell us what you like. Tell us what you don't like. Are there things maybe we can work on to meet common ground or not? And at least that way we know what the arguments are going to be. And that can be really powerful. The other thing is, I've been in some hearings where we've been presenting arguments, and a lawmaker is then talking to the opposition. And the opposition will say, well, they never contacted us on this bill. And that can look embarrassing. So by talking to other people, even though you know they're going to disagree with the particular bill, you don't get that thing where you look really bad because you didn't reach out to everybody that might have been affected by the potential legislation. So that's where we go into the stakeholding. We don't believe in surprise attacks. Our organization won't keep things close to our vest until the bill's actually introduced and surprises people. That can be really problematic. It might work one time, but once people know what your strategy is, they're probably not going to be real happy in the future. So it can actually really burn you with respect to talking to other lawmakers about introducing legislation. Talked about meeting with opponents beforehand, and that's just to give them the courtesy of knowing what's going on. We explain what we're trying to do. We thoughtfully listen to what their oppositional arguments are. Helps us to develop rebuttals. It also helps us during hearings to talk to lawmakers and say, we reached out to everybody we could to talk about this. And I like people to keep in mind, opponents have, in most instances, legitimate arguments. And we need to respect those, and we need to appreciate those. It doesn't necessarily change our point of view. But I'll just talk about animal issues, for instance. We have a real divide, urban-rural divide, because in the urban areas, there's a lot of things for protection of animals, protection of farm animals, etc. In the rural areas, they're not really into animal protection as much because, let's face it, they have animals they're raising that are going to be slaughtered for food. And so they're really not real big on passing laws that address animal cruelty and other things. So there's a big divide there. It's very hard to bridge that divide. So we appreciate where they're coming from. We don't agree with it, but we understand it. We understand their issues. And I always try and be respectful of that. At the end of the day, when the hearings are over, I go up and I talk to the opponents and I say, you did a nice job or whatever. Or they might come up to us and we just kind of, we're civil. That's what I want to say. We're civil. We don't get really ticked off because somebody was opposed to what we were doing and just try and shun them and leave. one of the things, even if you're opposed on this particular bill, and I'll get back to the example of farmers and ranchers, they love dogs. So they might really help us out on a animal cruelty bill when it comes to dogs and cats and other things, but they might be totally against it if we're trying to pass legislation to protect farm animals. But if we burn our bridges and we say because they didn't like our bill on farm animals, we won't have them when we want to talk about dogs and cats. So never burn a bridge. You always want to keep that open. You always want to maybe have those as potential allies. And a lot of times I talk to people, I've been married for about 30 years now. Do my wife and I agree on everything? Absolutely not. Yeah, and I look at this as the same kind of thing. We're sort of married. We're not going to agree on everything, but there are going to be things we can agree on. So let's not get a divorce because of a particular piece of legislation. Let's just say that's an argument. We'll move on. So again, the personal stories can help lawmakers understand the human effects, the human impact it's going to have, how this law would help somebody or could have helped somebody. And this can be really compelling, especially in gun rights issues. If this law had been in place, this person wouldn't have been murdered. And that can be a really, really compelling story. Or it could be a health issue. If we had this available, this person wouldn't have died. And that can be very compelling. Be prepared. You want to research the bill, understand the implications. We already talked about providing the data and the evidence to support your points of view. And the well-crafted testimony can sway undecided legislators. There might be some, we talked about 95% usually no going in. You might have one or two lawmakers who says, I'm on the fence. I like this, but I don't like this. And that testimony, if it's really compelling, can kick them off the fence, if you will. So this is just one example, and this didn't happen in Colorado. This actually was a Wisconsin one, but I liked it because it's just an example of how a personal story was able to sway legislation. And they're talking about testimony from somebody on affordable housing, and the constituent said she had benefited from the housing vouchers. It helped her move from homelessness to stable housing and eventually to home ownership. And it really convinced people that there is a path. If we pass this law, if we continue to support this, there is a path for people that are unhoused to become homeowners, et cetera. And that was really compelling. And it could be on any issue, but I just thought I would share that one. We talk about building relationships early. You want to get in and know who your lawmakers are. You want to talk to them in advance. You don't want to meet them for the first time at the actual hearing. Keep in mind, you want to also work with the aides. The legislative aides, a lot of times, know more about what's going on than the lawmakers, because again, the lawmakers are juggling like 500 bills or whatever. And I've been in meetings with the legislators where they've turned to their aide and said, "Well, what do you think?" They're looking for input from their aides. So the point being, even when you set up a meeting, if you're not able to meet with the lawmaker in person, don't feel slighted if you're meeting with their aide instead. Their aide can even be more influential than the lawmaker himself or herself. You also want to talk to the ones that are kind of on the fence, because again, if you go in there, if you present your point of view, they're going to be thinking about it. So we always talk to the ones that we think are skeptical, and we might say, well, we understand you don't like this because, but let me tell you about this. Let me tell you why that concern of yours is really not founded. So we always talk to those, and then we always talk to the ones outside the current focus. So we might be talking about animal issues, but we're also going to talk to other lawmakers about it because guess what? We talked about the committee of the whole. So we might have a hearing committee that's 7 people, but when that gets to the floor vote, that's all 65. So we want to influence as many people as we can. So what works? Short, respectful meetings. Most meetings are going to last about 5 minutes or less when you're meeting with a lawmaker. They're really busy. They're giving you the time. So you have to really go in and you have to look at it as an elevator speech. You're going to have to go in there with 3 to 5 minutes, and you're not going to be talking about all these niceties. Here's why I'm here. Here's why I'd like you to vote for this particular bill. During those meetings at the conclusion, there's always an ask. Can I count on you to support this bill? And sometimes they'll say no, which is fine, but you're going to follow up then. We always suggest sending an email or a personal note to that lawmaker saying, thank you for your time. I understand your concerns, but, and then you can outline what that was. And be respectful even when you disagree. Again, we don't want to burn any bridges. What's going to hurt your credibility if you threaten somebody? If you don't vote for this bill, I won't vote for you. That's really not going to gain you any traction. You don't want to shame them. Uh, you don't want to do a social media ambush, go on their Facebook page and say Senator so-and-so or Representative so-and-so was a total a-hole. You don't want to say that. It's not going to help. And we talked about not burning the bridges. So here's some helpful resources. One of them is that I use all the time is Vote Smart. So you just Google Vote Smart. This is what the homepage looks like. You can enter a politician's name or you can enter your address. And if you enter your address, it's going to pull up all the politicians that are in your district. So if you don't know who your lawmakers are, this will help you find them. And it goes all the way from Trump as your president down to who your congressional representatives and senators are. It goes all the way down to school boards, city councils, and everything else. So you can find out all of the people in your particular district. So in this particular example, I'm just going to put in one of my friends, one of my personal heroes for animal bills, Monica Duran. So I put her name in that where it says enter the politician's name. I put in her name, and this is what pops up. And there's a bio profile, if you will. I can look at her education, political experience, current legislative committees, caucuses, professional experience, and then any religious, civic, or other memberships she might be involved in. And why is this important? Let's say we're working on a housing bill. We want to go in and look on what her past history has been on voting on those particular type of bills and what kind of committee she might belong to that might have some influence. So if we go into this and I go into ratings, that's another area we go into. These are all the things that pop up, everything from abortion to women. So there's animals and wildlife, civil liberties, minors and children, senior citizens. So the bill you're working on might involve one of these particular topics, and you can click on those and see how she's voted on those in the past or what her position has been. And I'm just going to take one, for example, animals and wildlife. And here we go. Colorado Voters for Animals. We gave her 100% in 2019, 100%, 100% in 2023. We only gave her an 89 because there was one particular piece of legislation we didn't agree on for whatever reason. But this tells you she's a pretty strong advocate on animal issues. And it could be any other issue, could be abortion, could be senior citizens. But the point is you can go in there and you can tell what each lawmaker, where they stand on particular issues, and that can help you craft your ideas for who you want to talk to. So make a personal contact if you can, schedule a meeting, hopefully in person, but it can be Zoom, can be over the phone. Have your talking points or other handouts, so be prepared. We talked about respecting the lawmaker's time. Don't discount the legislative aides, be respectful. And remember, the lawmaker is representing his or her constituents. So the reason they might not agree with you is not because they might personally support what you're talking about. But, and this comes up, and again, I'm going to get into the animal issues, the urban-rural divide. We deal with certain legislators who will tell us behind the scenes, you know what? I really like what you're trying to do, but the people who elected me are not behind that issue, and I want to get reelected. So I have to value them because I was elected to do what they wanted me to do, not what I personally wanted to do, what they want me to do. So I hope you can appreciate that difficulty. So, and then we talk about sending the follow-ups, and I can't tell you how many times I've been into a lawmaker's office and where there's been a thank you letter or a thank you card, it's tacked on the wall. So your name is being looked at 5 times a day, 10 times a day, or whatever. So I always recommend sending something in writing, a personal letter, rather than an email, because they're not going to print that up and put it on the wall. So we're wrapping it up. I just wanted to show you this. And again, this gets into the meetings. This was done by the Congressional Management Foundation about 3 or 4 years ago. They were looking at what influence constituents have on their lawmakers. And on the top of the list, in-person visits, 56% of lawmakers said that had a lot of positive influence. 38% had said it had some positive influence. That's 94% of lawmakers are saying the in-person visit had some degree of influence on how they decided on a particular issue. And I'm not going to go down the entire list, but you'll see at the bottom the emails. We talked about slacktivism before. Only 5% of lawmakers said that an email had a significant amount of influence on what they did. So there you have it. So other useful things you can do, follow your lawmakers on social media because you're going to get little pings about things they posted. You'll know what they're doing. You'll know what's coming up. If they have a newsletter, and a lot of lawmakers do, you can subscribe to that. And I do that on the ones I'm following. And it lets me know what they're working on, what their position is. And if they're having a town hall meeting, it may pay to attend that because you can ask the question and then they're on record as to whether they support or oppose something. So exercise your power. Again, you have something every politician wants, and that's your vote or your organization vote. They'll listen to you even if they don't agree with your position, because again, they don't want to look bad by refusing to talk to you. And it's a numbers game. The more people for or against something, that's probably the way that the lawmakers are going to lean. So we're up to Q&A, and I don't know how we're doing on time, Adrian.
We have several minutes. So thank you for that. That was very informative. Some stuff I didn't even know and some wonderful suggestions. So thank you, Reverend Roland. So let's open it up to our guests. Do you have any questions you'd like to ask?
Sort of technical question.
Oh, yeah.
There are particular types of bills that must originate in one house or the other?
No, it's going to depend on the sponsor. So and if the senator decides to sponsor the bill, it'll be introduced in the Senate or the House. It just depends on could be dependent upon when they were running for election. They say, if I'm elected, I'm going to introduce this. So that could be either chamber. Sometimes we like to start in the House. Sometimes it seems it's easier to get a bill through the House than the Senate. You have more opportunities, if you will, in the House because there's more committee members. But and that all gets into the strategy based on the nature of the bill. But it can be introduced into either chamber. And again, every lawmaker has the opportunity to introduce 5 bills.
Right,
I was
Jim.
wondering,
Oh,
does,
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
does a non-legislator have an opportunity for access to the actual drafts persons?
If you're given permission, so if I'm working with a lawmaker on a particular piece of legislation and they're the sponsor, they can say to the drafter, Roland has permission to talk to you.
Okay.
And in a lot of cases, we actually, I mean, there's been a lot of cases where we do all the legwork. We get and this is the level of trust I have with some of the lawmakers. We say, this is what we'd like to introduce. The lawmaker says, fine, I'm going to allow the drafter to work with you. And we might work with that drafter for 3 or 4 or 5 months to perfect it. We might meet with the stakeholders. In all this time, the lawmaker hasn't been involved in the process. And then when we think we've got something really good that's been all vetted out, we go back to the lawmaker and say, here's what we got. And then they can take a look at it. So yeah, you have the opportunity based on the permission from the lawmaker to work with the drafter. And we do that quite often. And one of the reasons we're so successful as Colorado Voters for Animals is we do a lot of the work for the lawmaker. So it gives them time to work on other bills and other pieces of legislation. And they trust us because we really, we do the research, we do everything else. And if we think something's not going to work, we'll be right up front and we'll say, you know what? We thought this was going to be a good bill. We got into it. Now's not the time. So let's just go ahead. We're not going to introduce it. And they'll respect that. And I have lawmakers that come to me. I mean, I had a situation just last year where a lawmaker came to me on a bill that we weren't even involved in. And they said, we're going to give you permission to talk with the drafter because we've got some problems and we think you're the only person that can probably help flesh them out with the drafter. So that happens too. Gene, you've had your hand up.
Yeah, so one thing is I love that graph of the influence of different ways to talk to people. Is is there I don't know, like a citation or something where one could get a copy of that?
Yeah, I what I can do, I will send that particular slide to Adrian, and he can
That would be
circulate that.
I think that would be very useful for our Voices for Justice group.
Yeah. And again,
Um,
keep in mind, one caveat on that. That was done for congressional representatives. So
oh,
this is in Congress. It wasn't Colorado specific,
got it.
but there's
Okay.
really not that much of a difference.
Yeah. Okay.
You're going to find the issues are the same. Even at city council level, you're going to find the same thing. If you meet with a city council member in person, that's going to have more influence than if you send them an email.
Okay. So clearly our group is not going to be doing all the work that you're doing to basically develop the legislation. At this point, we're looking at bills through a lens of social justice and deciding, do we really want to support in whatever way or oppose in whatever way, right? Um, so our purview is a bit more limited than what you're doing, but this is still really useful for us. Um, I have a couple questions. One is, well, when I have testified, I've said I'm testifying on behalf of the Colorado Council of Churches and the Voices for Justice group. Um, and I thought that that might be, I don't know, weightier than saying, I'm Jean Demler and I live in Colorado. But I'm curious, from your point of view, do you think that carries more weight to be testifying on behalf of an organization?
Yeah, it's good and dependent. When I've testified on behalf of the Colorado Council of Churches, I've said I represent the Colorado Council of Churches. We represent 18 denominations throughout Colorado, representing over 800 churches and
Right.
whatever. And I don't know if I have the numbers right now, Adrian, but that tells them, 800 churches. You know, that's big. And again, if you go back to that Project Vote Smart I was talking about earlier, and go down to that click box on religion, you can see if that person has put something in there, and if you know they're faith-based.
Yeah.
And I've used this. I had an instance on one of them where one of the people in the committee was Catholic because I could find that out. And so I pulled out one of the catechisms and I said, as you're aware, catechism, whatever says this. And so I was like basically appealing to their faith. And
Mm.
so, that can be very compelling. But yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's really important when you come out and you say you're part of an organization. And what you can do if you have two people that are with Colorado Council of Churches, you can come out as the person representing the Colorado Council of Churches, and the other person can just come out as, John or Jane Citizen.
Hmm. Yeah, recently we did this with city council, and I was just curious because I was surprised that my colleague just said, "Well, I'm a resident of Denver," and I thought, "Well, yeah, I guess that's fine," but from my perspective, it seemed like it's better to say, "Well,
Yeah, so then you just combine them.
yeah." So
My
that's
name
what we
is
did.
Roland Halpern. I'm a resident of Denver,
Yeah.
Colorado, and I represent the Colorado Council of Churches, representing, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. So in our strategy, if say we're working on a bill, Bruce might say, be the representative from Carroll Council Churches, and I might be from Capitol Heights Presbyterian Church, right? But okay. I have another question. So I testified for a bill on wage theft, and the sponsors and the lobbyists, whoever, got a lot of guys there to speak in favor of it. And of course, most of them were Spanish speaking and had to go through translation, and they were moving stories. And in fact, it got out of the hearing. The Polis eventually vetoed it, but um, I always have this feeling, well, I'm this privileged white person. What stories, what stories do I have? I mean, I- it's not as easy for me to say, well, I worked for 2 weeks and the guy didn't pay me. So I'm trying to think how we bring in stories without being sort of patronizing. It just,
Yeah, I mean, one of the ways would be to find a white person who wage theft, was affected by a um, theft, and they are out there. It's just a question of finding them, and sometimes you can find them through your church. Might be a member of the congregation that has had a problem or whatever. Um, there might be certain passages of scripture you can use. I mean, I pull out Matthew 25 all the time. Um,
yeah, I've used it too.
use some of those if you can. And again, if you know at least some of the committee members, um, are people of faith, that might resonate with them as well. The other thing is it's simply wrong, and maybe appeal to the moral sense. It doesn't matter who the person is. Their money was stolen.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
and, and here these people are, they're trying to abide by the law, whatever, their money's stolen. I mean, what's their recourse at that point? Maybe they'll resort to crime because now they don't have the money to feed their family. Isn't
yeah,
that horrible?
yeah. Well,
So,
I have resorted to the faith thing, basically, thinking, well, I can speak from my faith that this is a justice issue. But I just thought maybe there was something more that I could do. Well, thanks. It's been very helpful to me.
and let me also say, don't dismiss AI. I use it all the time. I go into the chat thing and I say, um, give me all the arguments for and against, along with the citations. And then you have to look, once you get that, you have to go in and look at the citations and make sure it's really legitimate and that Chat GPT just didn't, or whatever you're using, Claude or whatever, didn't make that stuff up, because sometimes they do. It's called hallucinating because they don't want to disappoint you and they might give you something. I mean, I've gone in and I said, I don't think that's right. And they say, yes, you're correct. It isn't right. And then they
Huh,
go into it. But I mean, it can save you a tremendous amount of time just Googling on your own trying to find things. But just make sure it's vetted out and that you actually confirm. I always ask for citations, and then I go to the citation and I make sure the citation actually addressed that particular thing. I've been in some cases directed to something with the CDC, Centers for Disease Control, and I click on the link and it's a totally unrelated article.
yeah. Oh
So
God.
I don't
Yeah.
want to cite that until I'm actually sure. So it does take a little bit of homework.
Yeah.
But you could go, for instance, what arguments have been used in other states when it comes to wage theft? And what are the most compelling arguments for wage theft? And I also use it for what are the oppositional arguments going to be? Because it kind of analyzes it. And it'll even say, do you want me to create a one-page talking points or things like
Mm,
that? And it's a good start. I never use what they give me. I might use that kind of as a template and say, this is really good, but I want it in my own words. And, this is not Colorado. They might have pulled this from New York or something. So I'm going to change this. But it
yeah.
is it can save you a lot of time. So I don't want to dismiss it. But just make sure you vet everything on it and make sure it's accurate, because you don't want to be embarrassed at a hearing.
Right. Right. I've
CD.
never had anybody ask me questions. I,
And one of the interesting things about, and the whole reason, I'll kind of digress really quickly. The whole reason I became ordained, I'm an ordained animal chaplain, was because I was going down and I was testifying on animal bills from a faith-based standpoint. And no one ever asked me, well,
What is it?
what are your qualifications? But I thought, I don't want to be in that position where I say none. So I went ahead and I took a 2-year, chaplaincy course and got ordained as a result of that. So if they ever ask, I can say, well, I'm an ordained animal chaplain.
Mhm.
So, but the point being, they really don't question if you're coming from a religious point of view because they don't want to go on record as being confrontational against somebody's faith.
Oh, that's interesting.
It's really
Yeah.
kind of, it makes them look bad.
Uh-huh.
It's very, very rare for them to ask a question of somebody who's speaking from a faith-based perspective.
Interesting. Okay. Well, thank you very much.
All right, if there are there any other questions? If not, thank you so much, Reverend Roland Halpern, for that wonderful overview of how to engage the Colorado General Assembly and how to be a great advocate. For all those who are watching, you were not hallucinating. We got a lot of great information, and we're grateful to you for that. So once again, this will be posted on the Colorado Council of Churches website, and we will do that also through YouTube so that people can access this information as well. So again, just want to thank you all for tuning in, and I hope you will join us for additional when we have additional lunch and learns coming up in the next few months. We will do some more on advocating at the federal level as well. So this was a focus on the Colorado General Assembly. So once again, thank you, Reverend Roland Halpern, for that wonderful overview. Blessings to you all, and we'll see you next time.
We'll see you at the Capitol.